6, Exodus 20, the law. So Moses went up the mountain, and as he went up the mountain, great thunderings occurred, so the people understood that God was doing something, Moses was doing something, and when, of course, Moses came back down, then he presented, or he had with him, 2 tables of stone that God wrote with his own, if you will, hand. And upon these tables of stone, of course, were written the 10 Commandments. And so, for the very first time, we have a law that is actually written down. In the patriarchal system, that was an oral law. So God would speak to, in human language, in an oral way, he would speak to the fathers of the houses, of the homes, and give his law to them. Then they would give God's law to everyone else through their words. Now we have, for the very first time, a written law, so that anyone and everyone that wanted to come and read that law, they could do that. Of course, there are many naysayers and those who want to rewrite, ironically, history and say that, oh, well, Moses lived in a day and time where written language was not around. Just thinking outside the box here a little bit. Well, first of all, they can't go back because they weren't there in the first place. Archaeology does not tell us everything that there is to know about the ancient world. We have to understand that. The second thing is, man was so intelligent, I don't know that Adam didn't know how to read and write, folks. Why wouldn't he be able to read and write? Now, what language did he read and write? I have no idea. It wasn't there. You don't know, I don't know. I do remember, funny story, watching the 10 Commandments. Who was that? Charlton Heston. That's right, Charlton Heston. He played Moses. But in that was the Tower of Babel too. And I remember thinking, oh, well, all we have to do is whatever language, and Dad's like, no. Of course, it's all in English, obviously, which is only a couple hundred years old, really. Oh, it was a movie. It's a movie. So anyway, that was funny. I was a kid. What can I say? So no, we don't know what language Adam and Eve spoke. We have no clue. But Adam was a highly intelligent individual. Why wouldn't he be able to read and write? Why would God not give him that information? At the very least, if he didn't know how to do it, he could come up with a system to do it. And so he invented his own way. So, there's no reason to believe that from the very first human being that there was not literacy. Because there has always been a need to transmit information where 2 people are not in the same presence, where I need to say something to someone else, but yet they are a distance from me. So how, there was no telephone, obviously. So how do I get this information from me to that person? I do it in writing. Here's symbols of language. And so Adam very well could have come up with those things. So you're going to have some naysayers about that. But really and truly, there was already language written down when Moses went up to the mountain and got the tables of stone from God. So those things were already there. Okay, so introduction here, lesson 6. In the law, which is now written, God was addressing himself to one people, one nation. They became a nation when they left Egypt. Now they are one nation. Moses is their leader. And this law given to the Jewish nation and through Moses was not intended to be the final one, neither was it to last forever. It wasn't going to be the final one, as in there were going to be some additions to the law. God was going to continue to add to it. This was not kind of a once and done situation. But it was also not going to be the last law of God. It was a law of God given at the hand of Moses, but it was not going to be the last law of God. And some, of course, want to say that the law of Moses is going to last literally forever, not figuratively forever. Many times when the Old Testament says forever, this is going to be for you. God told Abraham that he and his descendants would be in the land of Canaan forever. Well, that word forever there doesn't mean in eternity. First of all, it couldn't mean eternally. From the practical standpoint of when the Lord returns, what's going to happen to the earth? What's going to happen to the land of Canaan in the day of judgment? It's going to be burned up with everything else. It's not going to exist. It's going to cease to exist. Well, if a land ceases to exist, can you inhabit it? Well, I mean, you just can't do that. I mean, let's use our brains, folks. But many times in the old law, when it's forever, it's just saying that there's a specific circumstance where it will come to cease or not continue to be. It's going to last for that entire time. No one is going to, a human being is not going to come in. A nation's not going to take you over and cause this situation to be overturned. Only God himself is going to provide that situation whereby it's going to cease to be a reality. In Galatians 3, verse 19, he asks, and when you look at the book of Galatians, you always have to think of Judaizing teachers. So Paul's always dealing with Judaizing teachers. Galatians, primary book dealing with that. So Paul then asks the question, well, why do we even have the law? He asks it this way, wherefore then serveth the law? Why do we have the law of Moses? That's the law to which he is referring. It was added, notice the law was added to something because of transgressions, till the seed should come to whom the promise was made, and it was ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator. So much in Galatians 3, verse 19. Why did God give the people a law to begin with? Well, he had to give them this law because of sin. It was no longer going to be efficient for the head of state now, and this point in time, in Exodus 20, it was Moses as the people left Egypt. But now he needed to give them a written law. Well, the law was not the end-all, be-all, and the very reason for the nation. The reason for the nation of Israel was because God made a promise to Abram. God promised Abram, Genesis chapter 12, you go back there, that through his seed, all families of the earth were going to be blessed. So, as a result, God needing to keep the promise to Abram, as the nation left Egypt, he now needs a law because of sin. And if, he did not give them this law, they were going to just essentially disperse into into the world. They would cease to be a nation. And so he needed them to coalesce. He needed them to remain separate from the rest of the world. And the law of Moses was a wall around the children of Israel. It was that partition. It separated the Jew from the Gentile. And it became that separator here in Exodus chapter 20. When the children of Israel are out at the foot of Mount Sinai, Moses is at the top, up the side of Mount Sinai, as God is giving the law. Now, the law, notice in Galatians 3, verse 19, it says the law was added. When something is added, that means that something else already exists. You have something and it's added to. That means it's something else is already here in existence. What was the law added to? Well, he tells us the promise. So the promise to Abram was given first. Through your seed, all families of the earth are going to be blessed. Then, 215 years later-ish, then we're going to have, 430 years later, 430 years later, the law is going to be added to the promise. The law did not change the promise. It did not alter the promise. The only thing that the law did was it strengthened the promise because it separated the Jew from the Gentile. It was given by the messenger, that's the angel. We think, of course, you think of angels as, a being with wings. In the Greek, it's angelos. It just means a messenger. It doesn't have to be a created angelic being made by God. Jesus could be an angel. He's a messenger. He's sent by God. So, as a matter of fact, there are a few occasions where Jesus is referred to as an angel. So here, the law was given by messenger from God in the hand of the mediator. Now, this mediator, again, you think Jesus, when you think mediator, that's not who he's talking about here. The mediator here is Moses. Moses is the lawgiver. That's why it's called the law of who? Moses. Because he's the mediator of it. The people, when they went through the Red Sea, who were they baptized to? They weren't baptized to Jesus, folks. They were baptized to Moses. And this new law is going to make them this nation. Okay? Now, let's skip down to verse 24. Wherefore the law was our schoolmaster or tutor to bring us unto Christ, that we might be justified by faith. After that faith is come, we are no longer under a schoolmaster. For ye are all the children of God by faith in Christ Jesus. Okay? Oh, go back up to verse 19. One more thing before we get to verse 24, because these two things go together. Why was the law given? Wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of transgression, comma. The very next word after transgression is the word till. If I said, I'm going to teach this class till 10, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to continue my class forever? Is that what that means? Or do you expect at 9:45 for me to stop teaching the class? If that's what I said, now I'm not making that claim, by the way. But that's what we expect. When we use the word till, that means that there's a limitation. Something is going to occur, but then there's a limit. It is going to cease occurring. The law, Galatians 3, verse 19, was going to continue until the seed should come. Not seeds as of many, but seed as of one, which is Christ. Okay? That's exactly what verse 24 says. The law was our tutor to bring us to whom? To Christ. So the word till in verse 19 mirrors what is occurring in verse 24. That the law brought the whole world right up to Jesus, so that when his law is now into effect, everyone is not justified by the law. That is, as long as I'm, men, as long as we're circumcised, there's a covenant. As long as we observe the feasts that's given in the law, as long as we do the things that are in the Ten Commandments, then we can have salvation. No. Now, those things are gone. Now we are justified by faith, because the law of Jesus gives us life. The law of Moses couldn't give life. It was given by who? By a man, Moses. Now, it came from the mind of God. Let's not think, oh, well, Moses gave it, so, It came from the mind of God. He is directing his people. But a man, Moses, is the mediator of that law. It just is unable to give life. But Jesus, the life giver, when he gave his law, guess what that law is able to do? It's able to give life. So when we follow after it, really we are following by faith. And that's exactly what Paul is getting at here. The law of Moses was always going to be temporary. The Ten Commandments were always going to be temporary. We do not follow the Ten Commandments today. How many people out there in the religious world, I'm going to say the word Christendom there, say, oh, well, we go by 9 of the 10 Commandments today. Or some might even say all of them. Maybe perhaps you've heard that. No, we do not follow any of the 10 Commandments. 0, not one. They're all gone. Every single one. Because we do not follow the law of Moses. Because Jesus died on the cross. And when he died on the cross, he nailed those commandments onto the cross. All right, number 3 here. We must remember that today we're under the law of Christ and not the old law of Exodus 20. The 10 Commandments are not binding on Christians. Well, we're already here anyway. We'll go ahead and read that passage that essentially I quoted there. Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances, that's the law of Moses, that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, doing what? Nailing it to his cross. So that handwriting of ordinances, that's all it said was you are a sinner and you are removed from God. That's it. That's all the law did. It said that you're a sinner. So if you want to go back to the 10 Commandments, be my guest, but guess what it's not going to be able to give you? You cannot have salvation through the law of Moses, folks. You cannot be saved by the law of Moses. The 10 Commandments are not going to save your soul. The only thing the 10 Commandments can do is you're a sinner. It blames you. That's the only thing that it does. It's against you. So if you want to go in from this age on the day of judgment and be justified by the law of Moses, you're in for a very rude awakening. Because you can't be justified by the law of Moses. You just can't do it. The people who were under the law of Moses are not justified by the law of Moses, folks. Can the blood of animals take away sin? Not one drop of any animal blood, nor every drop of all animal blood, can take away any sin. That's the whole point. And if you're under the law of Moses, guess what you're relying on? The blood of animals. And by the way, if you are observing and want to be under the law of Moses, how many animal sacrifices have you sacrificed? Do you know of anybody who wants to follow the law of Moses who is sacrificing an animal? Do you know of anybody? I don't know of anybody. But that is a central thing in the law of Moses, isn't it? It's essential. And yet I don't know one person, not one, who is sacrificing animals for their salvation. Interesting. Ricardo?
I was just going to say that even the Jews don't do that. Even
They do not?
Stick to the Ten Commandments and the Torah.
Right. That's exactly right. So they say that we're going to obey the old law, but then they don't even do that, do they? No, they do not. As long as we have Hanukkah, I guess, everything's okay. All right. Jesus nailed the old law to the cross. So let's go back to Exodus chapter 20 and look at the old law here. 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments were the foundation upon which all the other laws were to be founded. So the 10 Commandments are just the foundation, the pillars, if you will, of the building of the old law. And so we notice that the first four have to do with man's relationship or attitude toward God. And the first law then says everything. That God is to come first. God always must come first. What does Matthew 6 verse 33 say? Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. You see, God is first. His concerns and his pursuits must be our first priority. Every day, not just once a week, not just whenever we get around to it. Every day, God must be number one. And that is reflected in the old law. And so, he says, in verse 3, thou shalt have no other gods before me. I am first. Whatever false gods, but not just false gods of the land in which they were living, but also anything that would come between them and God. Money, relationships, self, whatever it is, you are not to have anything before me. Verse 4, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water underneath the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children under the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Now, God is saying and telling the people through this law, all these false gods of the peoples that are around you, they are meaningless. Do not take up a piece of wood. Do not take up a piece of stone. Do not take a piece of ore, metal, and fashion yourself a god and then bow down and worship that. You are not to do that at all. Everybody else, they're going to be doing that. But you do not do that. And if you do, there are going to be severe consequences. If you bow yourself down, then the consequences, you're going to get punished. You know, that's your soul at stake, but that's going to last from your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and they're going to have a hard life because you worshiped an idol. So do not do that. This word here, hate, verse 5. At the very end, he said, those that hate me. Now, here's the thing about many of the children of Israel, and of course later the Jews. It's one and the same. Essentially, we call them the children of Israel all the way up to Babylonian captivity. And then when they come back from Babylonian captivity, they are essentially the Jews because they're, well, really it's the division of the kingdom. But that's how we look at them, because they are the tribe of Judah, Jews. That's really what it refers to. So, but they're essentially one and the same. So the children of Israel in the land, they are going to see all these peoples worshiping all these different idols and having all these high places. And what many of them are going to do is they are going to worship those idols. They're going to go into those high places and also worship God too. So they're going to try to do both things. We don't have a problem with people having one foot in the world and one foot in the church today, do we? That doesn't exist, does it? Well, of course, that's a ridiculous statement, isn't it? It is a ridiculous statement. We do have a problem with that. Well, we're not the only ones that have ever had that problem. That's what this second law is talking about. Do not have one foot in idolatry and one foot in righteousness and worshiping me correctly. So the word hate here means to love me less. That's what the word hate there is. So do not love God less. Where does God go? First, at the very top. And when you put him at the beginning, then everything else follows as it ought to. Verse 6. He's going to show mercy to them, to thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Verse 7. Thou shalt not take the name of thy Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Whether it's through curses or whether it is to say his name in a common way, or whether it is to ask, not ask, but to, I think of the seven sons of Sceva, how they tried to get the demons out of that man, and he said, basically they said, we adjure you by the name of Jesus Christ, whom Paul preaches. And remember the response of the demon? Paul I know, Jesus I know, but who are you? You see, they were using Jesus Christ's name in vain. His name was meaningless. His authority for them was meaningless because they did not have a right relationship with Jesus to be able to do that. Well, guess what? If they did not have a right relationship with God and they continue to call on him to help them, look, they're using his name in vain. They needed to have a right relationship with him in order for him to help them. They needed to obey him. They needed to keep his commandments there in verse 6. Don't take the name of the Lord in vain. And then in verse 8, in the fourth law, he says, here's a brand new law. It was in the mind of God, but it has never been, until this moment, never been in the mind of man. what is that fourth commandment? Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The Sabbath day was the seventh, the last day of the week. And of course, he's going to tell them the reason why he's giving them this day to keep it holy. Because I made the earth in 6 days, and on the seventh day I rested. Well, that's what Sabbath means. It means to rest. So they were to mirror the creation week. They were to work 6 days, and then on that final and seventh day of the week, they were to rest on that day, as God did. Before, did Abraham ever keep a Sabbath day, a seventh day of rest? Did Abraham ever keep that Sabbath day holy? The answer is no. He never kept the Sabbath day. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Adam, Noah, Enoch, who walked with God and didn't even die. Did he keep a Sabbath day? The answer is no. No one, not even Moses or the people, had ever kept a Sabbath day until now. Essentially, with the manna situation, what were they to do with the manna? For 6 days they were to gather. Then on the sixth day, what were they to do with the manna? Gather twice as much, so that on the seventh day they didn't have to gather any manna. Okay? That was in anticipation of this law. See, God had already knew what he was going to tell them. So when he gave them the manna, this is how they were to do that. So it paired up and worked out very nicely with the fourth law, to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So only from Mount Sinai and the law of Moses until the law was removed did they ever keep the Sabbath day. And when the law was removed, there goes the Sabbath day keeping situation. People no longer had to do that. And of course, the day of worship moved as well. No longer on the Sabbath day were they thinking about holy things, but it was going to be on the first day of the week when God's chosen people were to gather together to worship him in spirit and in truth. So this is the very first time here in verse 8, the very first time that the Sabbath day is mentioned as to keep it. But it was a part of the law of Moses, and when the law of Moses was done, so was the Sabbath day. So people who say, oh, well, we still have to keep the Sabbath day, keeping the Sabbath day has never been a part of the New Testament worship. It's just never been a part of it. Anytime we see Christians gather together to worship God, what do we see? When do we see them do that? Acts 20, verse 7. Now upon the first day of the week, the Sabbath day, the day of rest, was on what day of the week? It was on the seventh day of the week. So, under the Christian dispensation, Christians meet on the first day of the week to worship God. The Jews, the children of Israel, and the law, who were under the law of Moses, they then rested on the seventh day and kept God in mind on that day as well. Thoughts, questions, ideas about the first 4 laws regarding God? Any thoughts, questions? Ricardo?
There are still some religions, and I can't recall any of them right now, that still worship on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely.
And they're supposed to be Christians or something like that.
Yeah, you do have all manner of different, pseudo-Christian groups, religious groups who, of course, we think primarily, the Seventh-day Adventists who, really prop up the seventh day as being, continuing on. Unfortunately, it's just a gross misunderstanding and misinterpretation. Really, it's understanding, nothing to interpret, but, of the new law. And unfortunately, they are willing to allow for contradictions in their own, claiming to follow after the Bible, and yet there are clear contradictions of how they are worshiping and, working with that. So that's a sad situation, for sure.
And did not Jesus indicate that on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew?
He certainly did. People were going to be doing that, and so, and many other times too. But you were exactly correct. Okay. Well, guess what? I got just about a quarter till. How about that? I did mention that I would stop teaching about a quarter till, didn't I? Hey, there we go. All right. We will pick up here on number 3 and look at the remainder of the commandments next week. There's our first Bible class of 2026. Really appreciate you being here. Good to see some of you, even for the very first time in our Bible class. And so grateful for that. We hope you make that a regular thing.